and welcome back to another social studies lecture. Alright, so today we're going to end off our issue number 2 on diversity with unit number 7, which is the last unit in diversity issue. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the responding to diverse society. Okay, so we're going to take a look at two different types of diversity and how certain countries and systems around the world manage these two different types of diversity. Okay, so the first diversity or first type of diversity we're talking about is socio-cultural diversity. So we're going to take a look at a case study of assimilation in France and also integration in Singapore. Now, the second type of diversity would be socio-economic diversity. This one we'll take a look at three examples. We're going to use the healthcare system as our general comparison point. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the healthcare system in the US, Singapore, and Sweden. Okay, so we'll understand a little bit more about what all these means in a moment. Okay, as always, this is our learning objectives for this particular chapter. Alright, let's get straight into it. Yeah, so today we're just going to learn about how we respond to the diversity. Right, past few chapters we have talked about why is there greater diversity and what are some of the positive and negative impacts of diversity on a country, focusing on Singapore. Right, so today we're going to take a look at how we respond to it. Now, social-cultural diversity, alright, just simply means that we have a very diverse range of cultures in the world today, okay, as a result of diversity, and of course later they will learn about globalization as well. Okay, so some countries will choose to assimilate immigrants, some countries will choose to integrate immigrants. So what is assimilation? Now, assimilation is a policy, alright, that is we're going to talk about France. Okay, France is one of the countries that practices assimilation. So essentially it refers to this. It refers to the adoption of beliefs of the majority group in the host country. Okay, so essentially what does this mean? Immigrants, when they come to these countries, okay, they bring along their own their own background, they bring along their own practices from their original culture. When we have assimilation policies, this simply means that when you arrive in this new host country, you shouldn't be holding on to these original cultures. Okay, you should be completely adopting the host country's culture as your own. Okay, so by the end of it, the identity of the immigrants should have no difference from that of a naturalized or born in this host country, people that are born in this host country. Okay, so usually this is what happens. Okay, assimilation happens when there are certain policies just to strip people away of their original identities and cultures and practices. Okay, yeah, so France is one of those countries. All right, now France believes very strongly in the idea of la cite, okay, which is French for secularism. Okay, secularism is the idea that religion is kept out of governance. Okay, so religion should not matter in the eyes of governing the country lah, and also that nobody's religion is preferred over one another. Okay, this is seen in the 1905 anti-secularism 1905 secularism law, okay, in France, which makes it illegal for any census to compile data concerning race, ethnicity, or religion. Okay, so these two terms you need to be clear. What is assimilation? What is secularism? Okay, please don't be confused over these two terms. Okay, they're not the same thing. Okay, but they are similar. Okay, they are linked also. Okay, so there are some policies, like I said, that France has introduced, alright, to essentially make this assimilation thing possible. Now, first of all, in education, okay, the French mandate that the education system must be secular. Okay, so there's no discussion of religion. Okay, there's no discussion of religion except in history or philosophy. Okay, there are also adaptation classes for immigrant children specifically. Okay, these are essentially classes that will teach them about French language, French identity, French beliefs, and all sorts of things. Okay, so this is just to essentially brainwash them, all right, before they join the mainstream schools with the other French children. Okay, so they believe, right, that the way to strengthen the national identity is from starting from young. Okay, so starting with children, especially immigrant children. Okay, so education will play a great role in keeping up this policy here. Second, in the world of employment, all right, they have their own policies for assimilation as well. Okay, so the French believe that assimilation is important in the workplace. Okay, so most environments, working environments, would require them to speak French. Okay, but the sad truth is that because of requirements like this, right, many of the immigrants become unemployed or continue to be unemployed because a lot of companies discriminate them simply based on the fact that they are immigrants and they may not be able to speak French. Okay, so this will lead assimilation policy to become less successful because the idea of assimilation is that everybody will have the same identity and then nobody is unequal. Nobody is prioritized. Nobody is more significant than another group of people. Okay, that's the whole point of assimilation, right? So if we have discrimination like it's seen here, okay, that is completely contradictory towards assimilation. Okay, so at this point I want to point out very simply that a lot of people think assimilation is bad. Okay, to be honest, you need to critically evaluate it. Okay, the main goal on paper, assimilation's goal is also to make the country more unified and more harmonious. Okay, so to prevent discrimination, stuff like this. Okay, but does it really happen when it's put into practice? That is for you to evaluate. Okay, so you cannot jump straight to saying that, oh, assimilation is bad. Okay, yeah. So in France, they have something called the diversity charter. Okay, essentially is a way for French companies to declare that, hey, we are against discrimination, we will never do such a thing. Okay, and the last point I want to bring up is about naturalization. Now we learned about naturalization in unit 1 already. Okay, so essentially in France, alright, it becomes compulsory for all immigrants to actually attend French language and civic education classes in order to gain PR. Okay, so they believe that by inculcating them already when they're coming to this country with the French culture, French language, and basically all parts about being a French citizen, okay, they will already be able to embrace these French attitudes, French beliefs at a much earlier point. Okay, so by the time that they actually become PRs and fully fledged citizens, okay, they will already be familiar with such a culture. All right, so yeah, that's the whole point of this naturalization program there. Okay, so like I said, assimilation on paper sounds good, but as to whether it really works, that is another question. Okay, so there are some tensions that have arose because of these assimilation policies in France. Okay, they require the people to keep religious beliefs and customs private. Okay, so private, this is the key point here. You cannot show, okay, in public your religious affiliation, okay, or your customs. Okay, so this is against the French way of life. If you choose to do so, it's against the French way of life. Okay, but a lot of immigrants still want to continue to hold on strongly to their religious identity because it's what makes them a person, right? That's what we learned before. Okay, so in 2004, actually, the government of France actually passed a law which prohibited the display of religious items in school. Okay, so for example, the Christians could not wear their crosses. Okay, the Muslim women cannot wear their hijabs in school. All right, and then the Sikh students could not wear their turbans in school as well. Okay, so all these were completely banned. Okay, because to them they feel like, hey, by allowing this, we are actually going against that national identity that we were so protective of. All right, so that is why there are some tensions. Yeah, so essentially the idea is that by having all these things, religious symbols is actually a hindrance to national cohesion. Okay, so uh, a lot of people started protesting it, yeah, because to them this is seen as violating the individual rights of freedom of religious expression. Okay, so there are two sides to this particular issue lah. Okay, essentially, but the French government, okay, like I said, they continue to make it clear that they will not ease up on these things because to them, this is a threat to the French way of life. Alright? So, in conclusion, assimilation is seen as ideal, but it may not necessarily bring out unity and harmony. Okay, so not all that glitters is gold. Okay, so be clear, okay, which point are you going to use to evaluate assimilation? Okay, because one of the questions, very common essay question, is for you to compare between assimilation and what you learn later about integration. So you need to know how to critically evaluate assimilation. Okay. Yeah, so tensions, okay, the problems about religious expression, the freedom of religious expressions versus the protection of the national identity. Okay, so which one is more important? Okay, that's for you to evaluate. So the second, okay, type of system where we use to respond to diverse socio-cultural environment is actually integration. Now, integration is fundamentally the opposite of assimilation. Okay, in integration, all right, immigrants forge a common ground with groups of people already living in host country while retaining their unique identity. Okay, so in an integration system, all right, the foreigners, okay, or immigrants that come to Singapore, all right, or some other place that practices integration, they get to keep their original identity, okay, but the point is they must still make certain sacrifices, certain decisions that will allow them to live harmoniously with the people of Singapore when they are already here. Okay, I say again, in an integration system, immigrants can retain their original background, their original practices and cultures. We are open to that. Okay, but the condition is that you must make certain decisions and sacrifices so that you will be able to live harmoniously with the people already in Singapore or wherever country. Okay, so that's integration. Now, in Singapore, we talked about this before. There's a need for us to have permanent residents. Okay, there is a need for them to be coming in to lessen the impact of our aging population and falling birth rate. Okay, so some people may integrate quickly, some people may take longer to integrate. That's why, again, Singapore has our own form of integration program, okay, to help these immigrants understand Singapore and the Singaporean way of life better. Okay, so the benefit of integration, okay, this is the benefit, please take note. Okay, the benefit of integration is that people get to retain their original identities. Okay, they won't get stripped off by these identities. Okay, but the condition is that again they need to adapt to the commonalities of the people that are already there. Okay, unlike assimilation, their differences are recognized and respected. Okay, we don't just ask you to, just give up completely your original culture. Okay, because that would be somewhat problematic lah, especially for multicultural country like Singapore. Okay, so similarly to France, alright, we give no special rights to any race, religious, or ethnic group. Okay, these identities, alright, Singapore identity, the Singapore national identity is based on diversity. Okay, so our identity is actually based off the idea that we have multiple identities in one. Okay, that's what makes Singapore special. Okay, so the Singaporean identity has a lot of these unique characteristics that some of which are similar to other countries and some of which are completely unique to Singapore itself. Okay, so what are some policies? First, bilingualism. Okay, so probably if you're listening to this, you're a Singapore student, so you will realize that you will need to learn English plus one of your mother tongue languages, okay, be it Mandarin Chinese, Malay, or Tamil. Okay, so this is part of what we call the bilingualism policy, which was introduced in 1966. Now, English will be the common language, okay? Common language, there is a term for it. It's called lingua franca. Okay, so it's the language that everybody needs to know how to speak, okay, so that we are able to communicate with one another. Okay, which is why the working language is English, okay, and everybody has to know how to speak English in Singapore, at least from 1966 onwards. All right. Whereas the mother tongue languages are there to help preserve our own identity, our own traditions in relation to who we are as a person when it comes to ethnicity and our background lah. Okay, so yeah, so the introduction of this English language, right, will actually serve as a good glue, okay, between people of different races, backgrounds, or ethnicity, because everybody can communicate effectively with one another. Okay, we won't have problems like in other countries where people don't understand one another because they are speaking different languages, or they're using a different dialect and stuff like that. Okay. Second, the PCMR. This is something that we've learnt also in Unit 1 when we're talking about the Constitution. PCMR, alright, was introduced in 1970. It is an organization, or rather a council, that is set up by the president, okay, to ensure that Parliament does not pass any laws that is discriminatory towards any minority race, okay, or religious group. So the idea is that if they actually have any problems with the laws that Parliament passes, okay, they will actually write a report, right, and they will report to the speakers of Parliament that, hey, this law is actually problematic, okay, and shouldn't be considered here. Okay, so that is the job of the PCMR. It's just to act as a safeguard in this aspect. GRCs. Now you will have heard this term very much frequently when it comes to election time. Okay, so some of you might actually be living in a GRC. Now GRC is a group representation constituency introduced in 1988. Okay, so this was actually, if you didn't know, GRCs were introduced to ensure that minority groups will always be represented in parliament. Okay, so apart from GRC being a 4-5 member group, okay, one of the condition is that in certain constituency, at least one member of the team contesting the GE in that constituency, okay, must be from one of the minority ethnic groups. Okay, so there are certain provisions for each constituency that is set out by the elections board. Okay, so you might want to figure out, or might want to find out, okay, what are these election requirements in your own constituency. Okay, so the fourth one is the Ethnic Integration Policy, EIP. Okay, in 1989, HDB introduced this policy, okay, to essentially prevent any HDB estate from becoming what we call an ethnic enclave. Okay, an enclave essentially is a place or territory that is made up of a single group. Okay, so when we talk about ethnic enclave, it essentially refers to this neighborhood or this area is solely or in a large majority populated by this certain group of people. Okay, in this case, we're talking about race and ethnicity. Okay, so the EIP was introduced to ensure that when people are actually you remember that there's a process to getting your HDB flats and whatnot. Okay, HDB EIP policy will be either to introduce that to ensure that there is a balance of all the different ethnic groups within a certain HDB estate. Okay, so there will not be any ethnic enclaves. So the whole purpose of this is to actually allow people to have more opportunities to integrate and be harmonious with one another. And through these interactions, as we learned before about common space, right? Through these interactions with one another, we are able to form greater, to strengthen our social cohesion. Okay, to understand more about one another and to prevent any misunderstanding from happening. Okay, so this is the whole point of the ethnic integration policy. Yeah, there's recently been a new debate about the ethnic integration policy in parliament. Okay, so you might want to go and google up about such the recent debate lah. Okay, so whether it is still necessary in today's Singapore or not. Now promoting integration, there's a whole section about the Singapore citizenship journey. Okay, so all new Singapore citizens, they must go through this thing called the Singapore citizenship journey, which is essentially a sort of a process, okay, for new citizens to go through. All right, so essentially it involves like talking about learning about our national policy, about learning about community sharing, no sorry about community sharing. So they actually talk with one another about their what they hope to achieve here in Singapore, okay, how they want to bring themselves together with the rest of the Singaporeans. And also you will learn more about the history, okay, of Singapore by going on these tours and whatnot. Okay, so you don't really need to know much about Singapore citizenship journey, okay, but it's good to know as always. Okay, so there are certain common experiences, alright, that form opportunities, okay, for us to be able to interact with one another. Okay, so just now we have ethnic integration policy. There is another one, okay, which is a similar policy just for permanent residents. Okay, it's called the SPRQ, the Singapore Permanent Resident Quota. Okay, so this was introduced in 2010. Same thing, it is there to prevent the new immigrants from creating sort of an enclave within one of our HDB estates. Okay, so today is around 8% for every housing block, 5% of new immigrants in every neighborhood. Okay, so we just want the immigrants to be able to mix together with the Singaporeans who are already living here. Another one, alright, is national service. Of course, all male Singapore citizens plus second generation permanent residents, okay, we must all go through national service for 2 years. Okay, so apart from training the men to defend the country, okay, it actually facilitates integration, right? Because this is something that's common experience between all men in Singapore. Everybody has to go through this, okay, be it the happy memories or the tough training or whatnot. Okay, it's a common experience that is shared amongst most Singaporean men. Okay, so together through that process, alright, of training and whatnot, they form camaraderie, right? And then they will have that attitude, okay, number one, to protect the country that they all now call home, and number two, they will be able to better bond with one another. Okay, and then the next thing is that community events are being held, alright, simply to help out in this integration process. So the National Integration Council actually have a fund, KCIF, Community Integration Fund. This is just to give people money essentially to perform a community integration project, be it talking about cultural exchanges lah, or talking about arts and sports activities and stuff like that. Okay, this is alongside what the People's Association is already doing, okay, with regards to the community center events and all stuff like that. Okay, these initiatives, the main purpose is to actually help the new migrants to better integrate with one another, or rather to integrate with Singapore citizens with lesser anxiety. Okay, as we discussed in Unit 6, okay, we know that there are actually tensions when it comes to the integration of new immigrants. Okay, some people, like we say, are not happy with the liberal immigration policy, right? They feel that new immigrants don't want to integrate. Okay, and then the problems with job security and competition for resources. Okay, so if you need help or you need a better understanding of this, please go and look at unit number 6. Okay, the video for unit number 6. Okay, so the result of these things, okay, some people generally express the sentiment that, okay, Singaporean identity and cohesion has become weaker. Okay, why? Because more immigrants means there's less so-called true born Singaporeans lah. Okay, some people who come to Singapore, they have this lack of ability to communicate in English. Okay, and their different social behaviors are actually seen as a hindrance to the integration in Singapore. Okay, so while integration has strengthened the bonds between certain ethnic groups, it still needs a lot of improvement for it to succeed. Okay, this is what we mean again by the pros and cons idea. Okay, so although it looks good on paper, okay, this might not be the case when it comes to reality. Okay, so this is for you to evaluate again. Okay, so now that we have covered social cultural diversity and how we respond to it, we will now talk about socio-economic diversity. Okay, so this is about differing SES. Okay, so we're going to use the example of the healthcare system. Why? Because healthcare system is a fundamental system that every country must have. Okay, and it is important for essentially it's important for the functioning of a country lah. Okay, now the first case study we're going to take a look at is the United States system. Now in the US system, we are actually talking about a market focus or market based system. So what does this mean? In such a system, essentially the government, okay, leaves it to the people to decide how they want to pay for their healthcare. Okay, so the government essentially leaves it up to market forces, okay, people, private companies to making a profit, okay, to determine the provision of healthcare services. Okay, so there are both public and private hospitals, but a majority is non-profit private hospital. A significant part is still profit making private hospital, and the rest are government hospitals. So in the US, okay, the government does not interfere with price setting. Okay, so it is really up to healthcare service providers, these individuals providers, to determine whether or rather the prices of certain procedures or certain treatments or certain things that come about as part of a medical bill. Okay, so as a result, there will actually be a lot of different costs. Okay, one person might have the same procedure as another person, but they end up paying very, very different prices. Okay, some of these costs is reasonable, some of these costs are actually very, very prohibitive. Okay, so to pay for their healthcare, most Americans have to rely on medical insurance. Okay, so insurance will pay the copay, right? The copayment. But the problem here is, okay, and this is a very major problem for America today, there is still a large majority, I shouldn't say majority, there is still a large proportion of Americans, okay, that cannot pay for their insurance premiums. Okay, so this is the price essentially that you have to meet or pay in order to get this insurance policy. Okay, in order to be a part of this insurance policy, many Americans cannot even afford that premium. Okay, so usually if you have a normal, okay, office jobs or normal jobs, okay, within middle and high SES groups, okay, you will be able to pay for these premiums, okay, be it because of your salary or because it comes as a part of your employment packages. Okay, however, you must remember, even in this group, only 10% of these people can afford to pay beyond what their companies pay for them. Okay, so imagine only 10% can afford, okay, beyond what the companies pay. So if they don't have this system or they don't have this insurance, how screwed would they be? Okay, so that's the problem here. Americans in lower SES especially cannot afford to pay because the premiums are very, very, very high. Okay, for insurance companies especially, making profit is their goal. Okay, making profit is their goal. So if they think you cannot pay or you cannot afford this premium, they will not sell it to you. Okay, they will not provide it for you just out of goodwill. No, no such thing. Okay, so a lot of Americans in this group end up they don't go and seek medical care because they know they cannot afford it. Okay, so they are much more when it comes to doing these medical procedures or seeking help for their health and whatnot, they are likely not to do it. Okay, they won't go and do it most of the time because of these problems with paying. Okay, so just some statistics. Out of 320 million people in the US, okay, by the latest statistic, around 41 million Americans do not have healthcare insurance. Okay, so there are some policies, okay, that have been introduced to help out these people. The first one, Medicare. Okay, Medicare is insurance, healthcare insurance by the government, which is provided for those older Americans. Okay, so those 65 years old and older, they are they have healthcare insurance from Medicare. Okay, for those that have serious disability or ailments, they also have protected by Medicare insurance. Second, Medicaid. Medicaid, okay, is for people who have limited income or serious disability. Okay, again, this is another level of healthcare insurance for these people. Third, EMTALA. Okay, so the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, simply saying that all hospital must provide care to anyone requiring emergency treatment until their condition stabilizes. Okay, so it's to prevent people, or rather prevent hospitals from denying care because of payment issue. Okay, so there used to be a situation in the past where actually a lot of hospitals there would actually refuse to save this person's life even though they are in an emergency situation or they're suffering from something very serious. They will refuse to administer treatment because they think they cannot pay. Okay, so EMTALA, okay, is the act that outright prohibits this in the law. You say you cannot do it. This is definitely not allowed. Okay, so there's one more. You'll learn about it in a moment. It's called Obamacare, or more officially the Affordable Care Act. Okay, so let's talk about challenges first. Now, challenges is that US face problem when it comes to balancing healthcare and the market-based approach. Okay, insurance premiums are high. Those in the lower SES group choose not to buy insurance because if not, they cannot afford anything else. All right, so the problem here is that insurance company want to make money, so they insure those that are healthy and employed, okay, so that they don't lose as much rather than those that are unemployed and with pre-existing condition. But at the same time, because of that, millions of Americans are not getting equal access to healthcare. Okay, so that is a problem here. So the US is trying their best to have a balance between those two, but as you can tell, it's not working out very effectively. Okay, so this is the problem for the US, and this is why there have been a lot of debate, okay, about this particular issue. Okay, but the one benefit, all right, of having such a market-based healthcare system is in fact it encourages medical discoveries. Okay, so the more competition people have, okay, the more likely they're gonna come up with new things to keep up with the competition. Okay, and you can see this in the case of the COVID-19 vaccine. Let me just rewrite that. COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, you realize that there's a lot of companies in the US who are all competing with one another, okay, with coming up with this COVID-19 vaccine. Okay, so yeah, so there is a benefit. There's a good side to it, which is, of course, like with regards to COVID-19 vaccine, because of this competition, people actually come up with effective and good vaccines in a shorter amount of time because they want to beat the competition. As a result, more of us will be able to get vaccinated as soon as possible. Okay, so there is a benefit to it. Now, this is what I was talking about. This is the fourth policy and the most recent policy, that is what we call the Affordable Care Act. Okay, let me just write this here. It's not working again. Okay, never mind. Okay, so the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, I think most of you will be familiar, okay, with the name Obamacare. Okay, so essentially is the idea, okay, that this policy will allow those that of a lower SES, okay, or those with pre-existing condition to be able to afford the insurance premiums. Okay, so this was passed in 2014. Okay, Obama was the first person, or rather the first president, to make this healthcare affordable. Okay, he's the first president to do so. Alright, so that's why it's called Obamacare. So that was the system for essentially for the Americans. Now we take a look at the system for the essentially the Singaporeans as well, so us lah, essentially. Okay, so now we talk about the system in Singapore. Now, Singapore's healthcare system takes a very, very different approach than the US. Okay, so in Singapore, we have something called shared responsibility framework. Okay, so for Singapore, we actually have a differentiated level of a healthcare system. Okay, so first and foremost, we have what we call the primary healthcare service. Okay, so these are people who are in the GP clinics. Okay, so your family doctors. Okay, this is the private sector, and there's polyclinics, which is more in the public sector. So these polyclinics will offer a bunch of basic medical services at a very subsidized rate. Okay, 85% of patients in hospitals are in public hospitals. The private remains is takes care of the remaining 15%. Okay, if you've ever been, or I hope you haven't been hospitalized, but if you do have that experience, or you have somebody who unfortunately was hospitalized, okay, you will notice that there's a differentiation in wards A, B, and C. Ward A is more expensive, it has no government subsidies. B and C, they have government subsidies. Okay, so there's a differentiated factor depending on what you want, essentially. Now, there are also ILTCs, intermediate and long-term care services. Okay, these are usually hospice care, nursing homes, community hospitals, stuff like this. Okay, so how shared responsibility works is that Singaporeans and the government both have responsibility in keeping the healthcare system in Singapore sustainable. Okay, so for Singaporeans like you and me, alright, we do this by setting aside a percentage of our monthly wages for future medical expenses. Okay, so this will actually we'll talk about this in a moment. Okay, so this will be part of our daily, or not daily, our monthly contribution to apart from CPF, there's also this part about MediSave. Okay, so this is part of our responsibility, so we can use these savings to pay for healthcare when the need arises. Okay, because this is still our own money because we are still earning this money, we're just putting it aside, compulsorily putting it aside. Okay, it's still our own money, so we will be more prudent with the spending, and we'll take different choices, or we make these different decisions that allow us to continue to be healthy, so that we don't need to use so much money when it comes to healthcare. Okay, of course, at the same time, the government responsibility is here. The government will provide subsidies to keep healthcare costs affordable, essentially. Okay, so this is how shared responsibility works. Government have one role, people have one role. We all have to perform a role to ensure that Singapore healthcare system remains sustainable. Okay, so as the healthcare costs go up in Singapore, all right, the policies introduced now are even more important. So the one group of policy that you need to know is the 3Ms, which is MediSave, MediShield Life, MediFund. Okay, so the government's consideration when deciding on these policies is ensuring that co-payment will be present to prevent overconsumption. Okay, so co-payment is essentially the idea that you pay something upfront, okay, when you're seeking for medical services. Okay, so this framework, again, it is still responsibility. Government give you subsidy, you be responsible with your spending. Okay, so it's still the same idea. For most Singaporeans, okay, you'll be able to receive government subsidies for up to almost 80% of your hospital bill. Okay, depending on whatever services that you choose lah. Okay, so you can pay, or rather you can use MediSave to pay for the remaining 20%. Okay, those who are eligible for MediShield Life, you can use it to pay for the very large hospitalization bills. Okay, and even after that, if you still cannot afford to pay after MediSave and MediShield Life, you can apply for financial assistance through MediFund. Okay, we'll talk more about what these three individual policies are. Okay, so key thing is don't get confused, alright? Don't get confused between each policy. Okay, that is a very, very sad thing to happen. Alright, so in Singapore, we practice universal access to healthcare. Okay, this is different from what you will learn later, which is universal healthcare. Okay, that is the Swedish system, or similar to the Swedish system. Singapore no, Singapore no. Singapore we practice universal access to healthcare. So everybody has the right to access healthcare. Okay, to be able to get healthcare, that is guaranteed. Alright, so it's a system, the financing system is individuals and government have responsibility in keeping the healthcare affordable for everybody. Okay, so in fact, Singapore is one of the few countries in the world who can spend so less of our GDP on healthcare. Okay, and this is very surprising given how advanced our healthcare system is in Singapore. So this is actually a key point. Okay, that a lot of other countries are actually trying to learn from us. Okay, because we are one of those countries quite rare for this to happen actually. Okay, but as aging population increases, okay, we expect healthcare expenditure to rise, okay, because of the elderly, okay, or more people getting older and older, so they will naturally require more healthcare services. So these are the things that we'll talk about making it affordable for everybody. So the government wants Singaporeans to take personal responsibility while at the same time not leaving those that really cannot afford it to die. Okay, so there's a few ways we do this. Nobody should be denied healthcare, right? So how do we do this? First, subsidies, direct healthcare subsidies for all these things. Okay, essentially, like we said, this is the 80% thing. There's also the CHAS scheme or CHAS scheme. Okay, this is for more private community services, medical services like GP services or dental services at private clinics. Okay, so this is providing additional subsidies for those who need it at private clinics. Basically means testing means are you eligible or not. So this is how they determine eligibility. Okay, so it will depend on your income and so on and so forth. Okay, so the government will decide whether you're eligible or not, so that people don't abuse the system even if they are actually able to afford it. Okay, so this is the 3M's just now. MediSave is a compulsory medical savings scheme. This is what we discussed just now. Okay, so Singaporeans and the employers must contribute a part of the wage to the MediSave account. Okay, MediShield Life is a compulsory healthcare insurance for everybody. It covers anybody from the moment you're born all the way to the moment you're dead. Even those with pre-existing condition is still covered under this healthcare insurance plan. Okay, so how it works is essentially every Singaporean must contribute to this scheme and contribute by putting money into what we call a common pool. Okay, so this common pool will be used to help those that need the help, okay, in paying for healthcare services. So it will be used to meet the healthcare need of every single Singaporean. Okay, so they don't need to worry too much about having a very large medical bill at the end of it, because this insurance plan plus MediSave will probably cover most of the bill already. Okay, so there's still a certain amount that you need to pay, so that you are the government doesn't want you to completely be reliant on these subsidies. Okay, you still have to have responsibility over your health. Okay, so if you can prevent yourself from getting sick and stop yourself from needing to use these healthcare services, then you should. Okay, and the way to do that is by asking you to pay a sum also. Okay, be not a very large sum, but still enough for you to not be over reliant on the system, and not be essentially just keep on over consuming the healthcare system or healthcare resources in Singapore. Okay, Medifund is an endowment fund. Okay, this is for people that really cannot afford it. Even after MediShield or MediSave, they still cannot afford it. Medifund will come in and save them. Alright, they will provide financial assistance for those that really cannot pay. Okay, so 3M's framework. Okay, there are other schemes such as Pioneer Generation schemes or other things, okay, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, there are schemes like the what's it called? There are schemes like the I mean sorry, off the top of my head I cannot remember, but there's a scheme where if you have ARI symptoms, acute respiratory infection syndromes, you can actually go to these participating clinics and you can get your checkup plus medicine for very very subsidized rate. I think like $5 last time. Okay, in during the height of the pandemic lah. Okay, so $5. Okay, as compared to a larger bill normally. Okay, so the policies that the government has introduced, okay, essentially will be able to meet most Singaporeans' healthcare needs, okay, and the costs that are brought about by socio-economic diversity. The main crux of the idea is that anybody that needs healthcare must be able to get access to healthcare, okay, and we do this using the subsidies there. At the same time, we ensure that people are not over reliant and over consuming by introducing a degree of personal responsibility. Okay, challenges. There are problems, okay, with this system as well. It's not perfect. Like we said, as more immigrants come to Singapore, okay, so immigrants, as more immigrants come to Singapore, as the age, okay, or rather the birth rate decreases and the elderly population increases, and the elderly population increases, okay, you realize that there will be more services that are needed for more people. Okay, so the twin factors of this increasing population and aging population at the same time has made it important for us to develop infrastructure to meet this increasing demand. Okay, with more increasing life expectancy and a lot of us still having a sedentary lifestyle, which means we sit around, I mean we don't really have an active lifestyle, okay, there is still now a greater chance of you getting ailments. Okay, so because of these problems, now our healthcare system may actually be overwhelmed if we are not careful. Alright, so we are actually relying on the system of primary and secondary care so that people's conditions can be detected and managed earlier. Okay, so they do not need to be overly reliant on more important or rather more advanced medical services when the ailment gets worse. Okay, so the system of family doctors, polyclinics, hospitals, all these must work together. Okay, to prevent to ensure the sustainability of the healthcare system in Singapore. Okay, so rising healthcare costs is also another problem. All right, government has been trying to address this problem by making healthcare more affordable by providing more subsidies. The only problem is subsidies come from where? Taxes. Okay, so I mean, it's not free money, all right? It's coming from each one of our taxes. Okay, be it GST, income tax, business tax, all these things. Okay, so we can only sustain this system of subsidies and whatnot if we do our part. If we don't, then there's no way this can be sustained. Okay, we must ensure that we keep our healthcare costs low so we don't seek help when there's really no need for help. Okay, and we must ensure that it remains cost effective. If there's no need for a certain test, if there's no need for a brand drug, okay, we shouldn't be prescribing these things if there is another alternative or if there's just no use at all. Okay, this is all to preserve our limited resources here in Singapore. Okay, so everybody has a responsibility to play in this healthcare system, and this is what makes Singapore's healthcare system one of the most interesting and the most successful healthcare system in the entire world. Okay, so individuals can require less medical care if you maintain a healthy lifestyle, right? So we should all maintain a healthy lifestyle so as to not overwhelm the system with all these problems that could have been prevented in the first place. Okay, this is what we mean by shared responsibility. Okay, so we will always continue to review our healthcare policy to ensure that everybody always has access to healthcare when they need it. Okay, so we must all play our part essentially. Okay, the last healthcare system we're going to take a look at is the government financed healthcare system. Okay, and this has another name. This is what we call also universal healthcare. Okay, you might have heard this term before. Okay, so Sweden believes in this idea of social and economic equality. Okay, so nobody should be discriminated based on their SES. Okay, so this is why they have such a system. Now, if you didn't know, Sweden is a Nordic country, so it's in Northern Europe essentially. Okay, so because they believe in this, the healthcare system here, okay, most citizens, or rather all citizens, are provided with near free healthcare regardless of their background. So everybody almost don't need to pay anything, okay, for their healthcare. There is an insurance system, all right. VHI is there simply just to give a preference lah for those who are insured, but really most people don't, because there's simply no need for it. Okay, the healthcare system in Sweden is largely public, so it's run by the government. Okay, there are still some private clinics, but most of the time is still reliant on public funds anyways. Okay, so for co-payment in Sweden, the Swedes only pay a nominal sum. Okay, because healthcare system in Sweden ensures that everybody get healthcare almost for free. Okay, they only pay a very small sum as a co-payment. The downside is that taxes are high. Remember, subsidies come from where? Subsidies don't just drop from the sky. Subsidies come from taxes. So the more subsidies you give, the more the taxes you have to pay. Okay, so this is something to consider. So first of all, Swedes above the age of 20 need to pay. Even so, they pay a maximum of 9 euros per day if they are hospitalized, and per year the maximum it can go is 122 euros. Okay, so it's capped at 122 euros. The Swedes need to pay maximum 122 euros per year for medication. Okay, when this limit is reached, no need to pay anymore. Okay, even if you get another 122 euros worth of medication, you don't need to pay anymore. So the maximum here is 122 euros per year. For a couple, okay, for the children in the family, all the children in the family, the couple only need to pay a maximum of 244 euros. Okay, all the children in family, maximum cost 244 euro. Once this amount is reached already, 100% subsidies for you from the government. Okay, so you don't need to pay any extra amount because the government will subsidize all the remaining costs for you. Okay, as you can see, there's simply no need for insurance at all. Okay, even if they do, it's just to gain priority. Okay, that's all. Okay, because really is very affordable, right? So in that case, it is a very affordable system, but it comes at a large cost. Okay, this is what we're talking about now. The main flaw is that GST, or in Sweden is called the VAT, value added tax, and income tax is very high. Okay, sometimes it goes as high as 51%. Wow. Okay, so the more you earn, the higher your tax. Okay, this is called wealth tax. Okay, so it's a very high tax. VAT around 25%. Okay, compared to Singapore's 9% soon. Okay, GST in Singapore soon is 9%, right? Compared to that, this is 25%, people. 25%. Okay, however, they still willing to pay this because they want to sustain this system. Okay, so it's very high taxes, but there are some benefits. Okay, so more subsidies, more taxes. Please remember this point when you're evaluating. Okay, more subsidies, more taxes. Okay, similarly to Singapore, Sweden is facing also an aging population problem. So the burden of taxation will fall on a proportionally smaller working population. Okay, so as people get older and older, okay, the workforce, or rather the people in the workforce decreases because of course elderly retire, they don't work anymore. So in the past, it could be like this: working population, the taxation burden is roughly the same. Now we have a smaller working population, but the taxation is still large. Okay, so the burden is much larger. Okay, so problems come when, okay, we have a smaller population, so the revenue, okay, the taxes collected will also decrease. When this decrease, same thing, subsidies decrease. Okay, furthermore, when it comes to immigration, okay, Sweden also having problems with this. Okay, immigration is changing, okay, the originally homogeneous Swedish society. Okay, so more people coming in, same thing, more services need to be granted to these people, end up the cost go up again. Okay, so this is why some people are still questioning whether immigrants should enjoy the same benefits for healthcare as compared to citizens, because to a lot of people this just doesn't seem fair, right? So however, the Swedes themselves are very proud, okay, to have this system, this universal healthcare system, so they refuse to change it. The problem comes, okay, as the years go on, this system becomes less and less and less sustainable. Okay, so I want you to remember this keyword. Okay, when you're evaluating healthcare system, please use the term sustainable in your answer as a keyword. Okay, so sustainable. Swedish healthcare system is becoming more and more unsustainable because of the aging population, increased immigration, increased costs for healthcare, but lower taxes now because of the smaller working population. Okay, so be it because the people don't want to change it, the government also cannot do anything. So end up, this is a problem essentially is kicking the bucket down the road, right? Yeah, so it's leaving the problem for the future generation to solve. Okay, so yeah, I think that is it for this particular chapter. Okay, so it's a very very large chapter, so if you're still unclear about certain ideas, can you please go back to the point in the video. All right, there should be a chapters function already embedded inside this video lah. Okay, so what we learned today is managing socio-cultural diversity and also managing socio-economic diversity. So for socio-cultural diversity, we're looking at what we call these policies of, okay, hold on, we will just call that acculturation and immigration policy. So this is just a general term, acculturation policy. You've learned the example of Singapore with our integration policy. You've learned about France with our assimilation policy. So these two, please know how to evaluate or compare and decide which one is the best, so-called the best. Socio-economic, we're using healthcare system as an example for us. Okay, we have analyzed Singapore example, which is shared responsibility. We have analyzed US system, which is market-based. And we have analyzed Swedish system, which is this idea of universal healthcare. Okay, so just be familiar, all right, with all these things, and then you'll be able to evaluate it, okay, well enough using our common criteria. If you need to learn more about how to evaluate these particular things or these particular factors, you may want to watch our video on social studies skills, okay, examination skills that are coming up very very soon. Okay, and with that, that's all I have for you for today's lecture. Okay, it's a very very long chapter, I know, so thank you for bearing with me all the way to the end. All right, so if you have any questions, same thing, you please feel free to leave it inside the comment section below. We'll take a look when we see it. Okay, so please don't mind, please subscribe and like this video. Okay, we work really really hard on all these materials and videos for all of you. Okay, so I hope this has helped you to at least understand, okay, a little bit more about how different system, different countries respond to the different types of diversity. All right, so it's a very interesting concept, and I think this is the first time you are actually going to go overseas. Okay, for the last few chapters, we've all been talking about Singapore, 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 Singapore. Okay, so this time we are looking at international examples, and this is a good precursor to our globalization chapter, which is from the next chapter onwards. Okay, so yeah, I hope this has helped you in understanding a little bit more about this. Okay, and yeah, with that, I wish you all the best for your revision, and I will see you in the next lecture. Okay, bye bye.